So my task today is to share with you how I went about including comparative planning, including other countries, into a US planning law course. So that approach that I chose was based on comparison rather than global. So we don't see court cases that end up in the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, but we take the approach of analyzing US practice of land use regulation using the legal and institutional contexts of other countries. So the assumption of this is that by learning how other planning law, how other countries enact and implement planning law, we'll have a better understanding of our own systems and how our own systems are constituted and function, more than just memorizing the cases, but truly really understanding the underlying assumptions of different countries' planning models. So I would just give you one example. If a person that is teaching US planning only would like to incorporate a country, I think Canada could be a good choice. So I introduce a country, and I don't introduce all the readings for that country, right? So I take shortcuts so students don't have to read too much. So I give handouts and PowerPoints about forms of government and judiciary structure. And then I choose a court case. So in the case of Canada, I choose the Delgamuukw case and the Tsukil case. They are cases about Aboriginal title in Canada. So students, we debrief these cases together. And it's actually the technique of debriefing a Canadian case is not that different from the one of debriefing a US case. So in that way, it works very well. But I think it's very good. Many students come to me and say, wow, this document is in two languages. This Supreme Court decision is in French and English. And that, start opening up a conversation about official documents and the languages that are used to convey information. So after doing, so I go with choosing a legal case, choosing a country, and then I choose a reading that's easier to digest, very easy to follow. And then I try to group that country with a group of countries. So in the case of Indigenous settler relations, I went into edited volumes on comparative planning law and found some useful readings. Then from that, it's still a lot of writing, right? They have just read a court case and then they read more chapters explaining more law. So I try to draw some figures and graphs to ease the way. But the idea is, getting them seeing the big picture without taking so much time, because time is an issue when you're trying to convey a minimum of US planning law and then try to bring other topics into the conversation. So I would definitely recommend also complementing with peer-reviewed articles. Then after that, I do the same that I did for this topic of Indigenous settler relations with other topics, but then, for instance, property law, the social function of law, the social function of land and property. So I group countries together. In terms of the social function of property, I group Brazil, Colombia, and Bolivia. But then I also use textbooks for planning law that are typical of a US planning law course, constitutional considerations and limitations on the police power and the administration of zoning, and your typical US law course and the kind of information that made as legal precedent into the case book, into the horn book. I also like this book a lot because it's Takings International by our colleague, because this book places in perspective the assumptions and the ideology of what property law is in the US by comparing the US with other high-income countries. So I think it's very useful for the students to see that and kind of work out the ideology of US property law. Then to complement these more standard case books and horn books readings, I complement that with critical law reviews. So there are wonderful law reviews about post-colonial legal theory, law and race, feminist legal theory. And then I do some comparisons that are meant to be more provocative than what is going to be or what would be in an IACP exam, because they have not made it yet to the standard of a textbook, and it's more debate, it's more critical analysis and conversations. So I have an assignment on constitutional comparisons where the students try to debate. It's a group project. For instance, what are temptive protections for the homeless in the United States versus South Africa? And I have some, am I over? No, I'm not over. Yeah, so just trying to place these discussions about the Bill of Rights and how judicial review happens in different countries and what is valued. South Africa is a very good example because it's all in English, so it's easy to incorporate, but it's still very different than the US and brings up interesting conversations. 1 year I also gave students a point to go and find what happened to the case after the case was enacted, because like in the US, sometimes there is eminent domain, but then the land's never developed. Well, the famous, internationally famous case, Grootboom, is a case where she achieved the right to housing, but never actually received the housing unit. I think
Makes sense, Joanna and Paula.
And here are some resources.
Thank you so very much. If you could save your presentation, others have been loading it. If you feel comfortable, there's some very good resources there that I think people would actually, you've already done so. So thank you so much.